Last year, my best friend Ally and I went on this great American road trip, trying to ski in as many states as possible in the month we had taken off from work. We did a lot of skiing, a lot of driving, and a lot of sleeping on various couches, truck stops, and of course in motels. Most motels were fine. Some had great free breakfasts, some had dirty hot tubs that left us scrubbing ourselves in the shower and joking about getting pregnant from the water. Some had weird stains we tried not to think about. Some were spotless but cold. A few were amazing. Only one was terrifying. We stopped at the motel around 10:30 after a long day of skiing followed by a good 6 hours of driving. We were tired and sore and ready for bed. We had made some wrong turns and were not exactly sure where we were. We didn't want to use data on our Canadian phones, so we were navigating old school with a map. It was mildly unsuccessful, but we were pretty sure we had a few more hours of driving until the next town, and we were not looking forward to it. So when we saw the glorious neon sign that blinked motel and vacancy at us, we didn't need to say anything. We both knew that was where we were staying for the night. As we pulled up in front of the office, I noted that we were the only people staying there. I told myself that it wasn't creepy. We were stopping close to a summer tourist spot midwinter. Of course there would be an excess of rooms. In fact, we should consider ourselves lucky that they were open at all. It was definitely not creepy. We entered the office, and a shrill little bell announced our entry to the world. We waited for someone to come to the front desk. Then we waited a bit longer. We shared looks with lifted eyebrows and tapped our fingers impatiently on the desk. "Hello?" Ally called out in the silence. "Somebody here?" We waited a few more minutes. Then the door behind the counter slowly opened. An old man poked his head out, spotted us, and his face split into a wide grin. "Guests," he said. "You know, I thought I heard something, but I told myself it was just my imagination. Just my imagination. We don't get a lot of visitors around this time. And two beautiful young ladies too. Ah, I'm sorry I kept you waiting. I just couldn't believe that I had such luck. Welcome, 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 welcome." He was certainly an odd duck, but I used to work long, lonely night shifts. I know how excited you get when something happens. "So, travel-weary strangers, can I offer you a bed to rest your head?" He smiled. "Yeah, how much is a double room?" He looked at us, grin not wavering. $99 for 2 beds. $79 for 1 bed. I was ready to splurge for the 2 beds. Ally moved a lot in her sleep and hogged the covers. Last night she had kept waking me up. "Let's do 2 beds. I looked at her pleadingly. She gave me a quick look filled with annoyance. I looked back at the man. His grin had faded. He looked as annoyed as Ally for a moment. When he noticed me looking at him, his grin snapped back into place. Actually, it seems we only have the 1 bedrooms ready. I'm so sorry." "Wait, what?" I couldn't help but burst out. "There are like no people here." "Oh yes, that is the problem, isn't it? Sometimes we don't keep all the rooms prepped in winter. Saves costs, you know." I considered that. It didn't make sense at all, but I was too tired to argue. "You know what? For such pretty ladies, I give you a discount. How about $69 for the 1 bedroom? We'll take it." Ally responded before I had time to think. "Thank you. We can pay by card, right?" No, I'm afraid not. We don't. Well, we never got around to that modern stuff. Gotta stay off the grid, right?" "Haha." He laughed at his own joke. I shuddered involuntarily. We had cash. It was fine. He was creepy, but we were tired. We paid, got the keys, and drove up and parked in front of the room. I grabbed my stuff from the car, unlocked the door, and surveyed the room. It looked clean enough, the bed was big, and I was tired as hell. "Hey, I'm gonna go for a little walk, actually. My legs are so stiff," Ally said from behind me. "Wanna come?" I eyed the bed. It looked too comfortable. Ally had a good point, but that bed was speaking to me. "Nah, I'll just shower and crash." "Ok, cool. I won't be very long." She turned and left. I slammed the door shut behind me and stripped out of my clothes as fast as I could. I jumped in the shower, and the luxurious feeling of hot water run down my body I had to force myself to get out. I went into the room, put on my PJs and laid down on the bed. Ally wasn't back yet, but her nighttime strolls sometimes lasted as long as an hour, even when she was this tired. She had a hard time falling asleep, and those walks apparently helped. I got my phone out and tried connecting to the Wi-Fi. It didn't work. I immediately got annoyed. Not because I really needed the Wi-Fi, but because I had paid for it and I wanted it. So I just laid there, getting annoyed, glaring at the ceiling fan. It was a weird model, something black sticking out from the bottom. I had never seen that before. I wondered idly what it did. Then I thought about how we were the only people staying here, how Ally was walking somewhere alone in the dark, how I didn't know where she was, how creepy that guy had been when he laughed at his joke about staying off the grid. Then the familiar feeling of fear started creeping into my guts. I knew where my mind was going. I have an overactive imagination. I tend to turn every situation into a horror movie in my head. It's a real problem in my dating life. I think most guys are serial killers. Ally always makes fun of me for it. I thought about how the guy had offered us 2 beds, and then refused to give it to us. Did he want us in this room specifically? Why? He probably had some creepy fantasy of 2 young girls sharing a bed. I shook my head, trying to stop my mind from spinning out of control. I go of the bed and went over to the huge mirror on the wall. I got my hair out of the towel and started brushing it. I couldn't quite get rid of the uneasy feeling at the pit of my stomach. I knew I wouldn't sleep well that night. For some reason, I thought of the one-way mirror scene in Cabin in the Woods. God, why do I watch horror movies? They always come back to me at the worst times. So creepy. I vaguely recalled that there's a way to check if it's a real mirror. What was it again? You touch the mirror, and if there's no gap between your finger and the mirror finger, it's fake. I touched the mirror. There was no gap. I could see my eyes widening in fear in the mirror. No, wait, that can't be it. I tried to reason with myself. That's ridiculous. This is fine. We're fine. It's gotta be the other way around. But maybe I realized I could check the bathroom mirror. It was one of those medicine cabinet mirrors. That one was clearly real. I walked slowly into the bathroom. Please be the same, please be the same, please be the same, I muttered. I wiped the fogged mirror, took a breath, and slowly pressed my index finger against the surface. Ice filled my veins. A gap. I took a deep breath, trying to clear my mind. We needed to get out of there. Where was Ally? I felt panic bubbling. I needed to get out of there, okay. But play it cool, they could be watching. Who the hell are they? I can't let them know. I have to get out of here. The black thing on the fan. My breath caught in my throat. It had to be a camera. I went back into the bedroom and started putting my stuff back in my little bag. I hoped it looked innocent enough. Maybe we wanted an early start, right? Maybe I had OCD and liked all my stuff in my bag. It was fine. I went to put the bag in the car. I turned the doorknob. It didn't move. I tried to stay calm, not to panic. They could be watching. Maybe it was jammed. I tried the handle again. Nothing. I used all my force. Nothing. I got my phone out. Figured I'd text Ally, call the police. Something, no signal. I wanted to cry. I looked around the room for a window. For the first time, I noticed they had bars in front of them. I've seen that before, of course. It's a safety precaution. My ground floor apartment in the city also had them, so that people can't break in. I had never before considered that they also very effectively stopped people from breaking out. I figured the door must unlock from the outside only. Once you're in the room, you're stuck there. I pinned all my hopes on that idea. Ally would come back, unlock the door, and we'd get out of there. The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. I kept trying to come up with a plan, with something, but my mind was drowned in adrenaline. Finally, I heard steps outside. Ally was back. I got up, standing right next to the door. She put the key in the lock, turned it, and it opened. Ally, get in the car right now, I said as I pushed her out of the room. What? Why? Fucking camera in the room, I hissed as I pushed her back. Her eyes went wide, and she immediately obliged. I unlocked the car, threw my bag in the back, and we both jumped in. The door to the adjacent room burst open, and the old man came running out. He slammed his hands on the hood, as if to try to hold us back with his bare hands. We both screamed as I skidded out of there. Even in my panic, I could see several shapes behind him in the room. He had not been alone. I just kept driving, praying that they weren't following us. We have to call the police, Ally said after an hour of driving. We have to. I nodded. She used her precious data to find the number of the local sheriff's office and called them up. Only heard half the conversation. Hey, I want to report an almost crime. I'm sorry. I'm not quite sure what. No, sir. It's not a joke. We were staying at this motel and there was a camera. And one of those one-way mirrors. I interjected. What? She turned to me. Yeah, tell him. And a one-way mirror. And the door didn't unlock from the inside, she said, looking to me for confirmation. I nodded, and there were people in the room behind that mirror, too. Her eyes went wide in fear as she repeated the information. Then she described the location of the motel. She sounded uncertain. We've been skiing. She frowned. Yeah. No, that's fine, we'd rather not. I looked at her quizzically. No, really, we're already out of state. We just wanted to let you know. She abruptly hung up. What was that? I don't know, he wanted us to come back and give a statement. Shouldn't we? She didn't say anything for a little while. I don't know, I got a really bad vibe. Let's not, please? And small-town American sheriff's office? That's like totally how you die in the horror movies. We're not in a horror movie, though. Aren't we? I shrugged. I wasn't really stoked on the idea of going back either. Frankly, I was still worried that they were following us. I really didn't want to get pushed off the road by some psycho hillbilly motel manager. And we had told the police we had done our part. Or so I thought. But yesterday, there was a story in the news about 3 young girls going missing. They were road tripping in that area. Never made it back to Seattle. I can't help but wonder if they stopped at that same motel. I can't help but wonder what would have happened if Ally didn't take that walk. If we both got locked in that room. What the people in the other room expected. What they were gonna do. If they just watch if Ally and I could have been that missing person story. Right off the bat, I want to get this out there. I do not believe in ghosts, or did not. That was until my experience last week. Now I'm not too sure. What changed my mind? My night at a creepy roadside motel. I guess by definition all roadside motels can be described as creepy. Nearby highways, dimly lit parking lots, shady characters hanging out of doorways smoking. And the one me and my girlfriend stayed in last week, where I had this paranormal experience, was no different. A place well and truly stuck in the 50s called The Lodge. We found it just off the I-95 in the middle of Maine. We were on our way to Canada to attend a wedding in the province of New Brunswick, and were driving because 2 weeks earlier my girlfriend had had the great idea of taking the scenic route. Basically because she hates flying. Why not? I had thought at the time. What else could be more enjoyable than a nice summer drive up through Maine? It turned out that a lot of things could have been more enjoyable, for the scenic route came with a lot of rain and not much else. A storm coming off the Atlantic pounded us the moment we left Boston. The music in our car accompanied non-stop by the swishing of windscreen wipers. We had been due to stop at the night in Portland on the coast with a friend. But that morning he had called to say his mother in New York was sick and he would be spending the weekend with her. Never mind. Why don't we stop somewhere else for the night? And that is where the roadside motel comes in. It was just before sunset that we pulled into its parking lot. Over the noise of the storm I asked, "Is the place abandoned?" Which was not an unreasonable question, since half the doors and windows in the U-shaped courtyard were boarded up. My girlfriend simply pointed to a small office, where a neon light flickered that read The Lodge. Just below the sign, through a dirty window, sat an old lady behind a desk, watching us. I got out into the rain. Flashes of lightning zigzagged across the black sky as I jogged between the little rivers forming on the broken tarmac. Between the rolling thunder, you could hear the drones of the passing vehicles on the nearby I-95. Upon my entrance into the office, a room which smelled of a mix of cigarettes and mothballs, the old woman merely stared at me, her eyes hollow and lifeless. "Are you open?" I asked, water dripping from my coat onto the stained carpet. The old woman did not say anything, only continued to watch me with her hollow eyes. Then, like she had been considering my request, began to nod slowly. "Okay, how much is a room?" She rose from the chair, placed on the counter a set of keys, which had the number 66 attached as a tag. "Okay, yes, at this point you turn around, get back in the car and hit the highway." It was that part in the horror movie where the lead role finds a staircase descending into darkness, and yourself, from the safety of the audience, are screaming, "Don't go down there, stupid." But what do they always do? They always go down. I suppose it wouldn't be such a great story if the character slams the door shut and leaves the killer waiting in the dark twiddling his thumbs. Would it? But I digress. At the old woman sliding the keys forward, I got out $20 and waved it in the air like a white flag. $20 for the night? The old woman nodded and pointed at the keys. I glanced out of the window towards the car. Lightning momentarily illuminated my girlfriend in the steam-up car, nervously watching me. "Should we stay here?" I turned back round to the woman and grabbed the keys. "Thanks," I muttered, and headed back out into the rain. Upon entering the car, I dangled the keys in front of my girlfriend. "Friendly woman," I said cheerily, though she said business was quiet tonight. "Yeah, just a bit," my girlfriend replied, looking round the dark courtyard. "It's kind of creepy here. Why don't we head straight on to Canada tonight?" "Nah, should be fine." I shifted the car in gear and trundled it over to near room 66. "One night won't hurt us." Famous last words. Surprisingly, room 66 was fairly modern. Whitewashed walls, a widescreen TV, refrigerator, clean in-soot bathroom, potted flowers, mirrors. It almost eased our nerves of being the only guests in this rundown motel during the middle of a storm. Of course, there was a locked door that is, at the back of the room, which at the time we assumed was a small cleaning closest. I tried the handle and afterwards forgot all about it as we each took showers, then settled into bed. My girlfriend, who would have been able to take a siesta on the edge of a cliff during a hurricane, fell swiftly to sleep. But for me, it took much longer, tossing and turning until I finally drifted off. I woke around 2 a.m. and that is when the funny business started. It began with a noise on the roof. Now it wasn't the pit-patter of rain upon the flat roof. No, it sounded like footsteps, as if someone was pacing up and down. Okay, I thought, it's a bird. There is a bird on my roof. It's just a bird. Yet the more I told myself that, the more frantic the steps became, until suddenly they stopped. I lay underneath the sheets, listening. The rain had ceased, and the storm moved on, but still the howling wind whipped around the courtyard outside. Relax, I told myself and got up to go to the toilet, using the dim lights in the parking to guide my way to the in-soot bathroom. Now, it was as I was in the middle of my business that the door to the bathroom, which I had purposely opened to full extent, began slowly creaking closed by itself. My initial reaction upon seeing it in my peripheral vision was that the ground must be uneven. But then my brain began working on overtime to determine if the door had done that earlier. No, it hadn't. We were on perfectly flat ground. So now I'm doing my business in a race against time against this slowly creaking door. And the bathroom, having no natural light, is in near total darkness. And that is when my heart starts beating fast because I have a very strange feeling that there is someone stood in the bathtub, no other than a little girl watching me. The moment that door closes, I know that I am toast, and I would have my throat ripped out by whoever or whatever is standing there. In the last moment, I lurched for the door and jammed my fingers between the gap, flicking on the light switch. There was no one in the bathtub. It was just my imagination. I stood there, panting, my body covered in a thin layer of sweat. I put the door back into its position, fully open, and waited for it to move again, disproving my theory of the perfectly even ground. It did not move a millimeter. I moved it into another position. Maybe it was the angle you had to get right for it to move. No, it remained in place. Okay, that's creepy. I turned the lights off and returned to bed, where I lay motionless, staring up at the ceiling while my heart pounded in my ears. That is when I saw a silhouette move past the window outside. It was a faint silhouette, but all the same, something did walk past. I sat up, watching the curtains and the dim lights in the parking lot. Could have been the old lady from the office, maybe checking on something? The old lady who never said anything and accepted my $20. Hey, I said, shaking my girlfriend awake. No time to act brave now. No, sir. Request dismissed, sir. Hey, Emily, I continued, shaking her harder. Wake up, goddammit. But she just lay asleep or unconscious. I felt a plunge of fear, and that's when the parking lot light went out, casting the room into total darkness. Wake up, Emily. I wanted to scream, but no words came out, and then I heard a key being placed into the lock of that door on the other side of the room, the one that we had assumed was the cleaning closet. And the key slowly began to turn until the lock clicked, and even though I could not see it due to the darkness, I felt a draft of cold air and knew it had drifted open. Oh fuck, I'm thinking, sitting there next to my unconscious girlfriend, shivering with fear. What do you want? I called out feebly. I was answered by the flick of a light switch, revealing that what lay behind that door. It was a corridor. There couldn't be a corridor, though. The motel was a small U-shaped courtyard of single units. There was surely not enough space. Yet, right before my eyes was a secret passage. I got out of bed. Yes, that's right, in my PJs I got up and started inching towards the corridor. Why? I don't know why, something was drawing me in. It was like my body had a mind of its own and was taking me towards the corridor. No, I croaked, trying to convince my body to stop. I could only control the neck muscles, however, so I turned to look at my girlfriend in the bed, to try and plead with her to wake up and save me from the imminent disaster that I was soon to befall. But as I turned my neck, I quickly found that she was awake, watching me with hollow and lifeless eyes like that of the old lady at the desk. Emily? I stuttered. She rose her finger to lips, shushing me. Then she grinned and blood spilled out of her mouth and ran down her chin. I never got to finish the sentence because the force that was pulling my body had brought me into the middle of this secret corridor. On either side it ran off into darkness. There were other doors that lined the passage, doors which all had the number 666. Then, out of the darkness, one end of the corridor began to glow red. It grew brighter, and strangely, I could feel a throbbing, like somewhere down there was a beating heart. I turned my head away, and as I did, I glanced back into my room, where I saw that my girlfriend was now standing beside the TV, her body slumped, her face hidden by her hair, as if she was possessed. Emily! I tried to scream, but yet again, no words came out. The corridor glowed so brightly now I could feel the heat on my skin. The next part was the worst. From behind the doors that lined the corridors came the sound of voices. People I knew. A friend who had passed away long ago started calling my name, beating against the door with his fist. He calling to me to let him out, telling me it was my fault he died. How long I stayed in that corridor for I don't know. It might have been a minute, maybe a day, who knows, maybe I am still trapped there, perhaps in one of those rooms, waiting like my friend for the next victim to be ensnared in the trap. Somehow, however, I don't know how, I found myself back in the car, driving down I-95. I was shaking violently, and my girlfriend lay in the passenger seat unconscious. I pulled right off the highway and made it to the nearest town, where I collapsed at the front door of the nearest house, babbling incoherently about demons and witches and corridors and motels. It's been a week now and my girlfriend is still not awake. That night she was airlifted to Maine Medical Center where it was diagnosed that she was in a coma. I gave my statement to the police about what happened at the motel. They don't believe me. Of course they don't, would you? An officer told me that the lodge closed in the 60s after a father murdered his whole family there one night. But that's my story. Emily's family are here in the hospital and are refusing to speak to me. They think I tried to murder her. I rang my folks and they flew out a few days ago and are with me now. My dad's been sorting out a lawyer because he heard whispers of myself being charged if Emily fails to wake up. I'm sharing this account because I don't know who else to turn to. Maybe I'm mad, but I experienced something dark and disturbing last week in that motel. Many years ago, a group of 12 of U.S. teens went on a backpacking trip to a Southeast Asian country during term break. Among the things in our itinerary, we had wanted to stay in a mini theme park casino hotel area situated high up in the mountains. Only thing is, we were bad at planning to say the least and pretty much just thought we could bunk anywhere, take any room in any hotel we didn't book in advance. It was peak season, unfortunately, and when we got there, no good hotel could accommodate us. In the middle of the night, carrying our large backpacks, we had to wander far from the lights of the main resort, down into the other side of the dark, desolated mountains. See, other than the resort located at the very top of the mountain, there were very few people living there, nor were there many establishments around the other areas of the mountain. It was dead quiet. The journey to find a place to spend the night at 11 p.m. was unnerving to say the least. The mountainous areas away from the main resort were completely devoid of life, and tall trees surrounded us from all sides along the main path. Beyond these trees was an unmanaged dark forest, and pretty much no one ever went up into the forest. For obvious reasons, low human traffic in places other than the resort. The street lamps around this area were poorly implemented as well, and the entire area was pretty dark, mainly illuminated by the dim pale glow of the moon. We walked quite a distance in these conditions until we saw a large empty car park, with a rather dilapidated hotel in the middle. There were what seemed to be a smatter of large black char marks at the side of the hotel, creeping up all the way from the 3rd to 9th floor, indicating that there had once been a relatively huge fire there in the past. On all sides of the car park you could only see tall, intimidating trees looming ominously, obscuring the light from the moon. The only light from that area came from the rundown hotel building, without any street lamps to illuminate the car park. Clearly, this area in general had been neglected for quite some time. The car park was desolate. In fact, there was only one dusty car parked near the hotel building. To be honest, some of us in the group were very apprehensive about staying here, but between walking aimlessly in the eerie silent woods, staying out in the cold of the night mountain air, and staying in a, at the very least, hotel-type establishment, the choice was clear. Either way, we would only be staying for 3 nights. What could possibly go wrong? The interior of the hotel was a lot less menacing than the outside. Though evidently aged and slightly musty, the professional smiles of the receptionists at the front desk assured us this was a functioning lodging space. We asked for rooms with the cleanest living conditions, and they booked us in at the highest open floor, the 12th floor. For whatever reason, they told us that 2 of us had to be located in a room relatively far away from the rest, as they had other patrons on that floor and there were insufficient consecutive rooms for us. This struck us as odd because the hotel seemed extremely quiet, and at times we wondered if we were the only guests. Nevertheless, we agreed. Me and a large burly friend decided that we would take the corner room for 2, as we didn't care too much for games through the night and constantly interrupted sleep. The corner room seemed peaceful enough, and well, someone had to make the sacrifice after all. This roommate was the person in the group of 12 that I had known the least. He was a transfer student who had just joined my class at school recently. He was a religious foreign from Africa previously, classmate, older, and his habits, culture, etc. were all very new to us. There was much we did not know about what he did during the time before he knew us. That and his imposing stature, exotic, unfamiliar appearance, to a teen at that time, made it slightly more intimidating to be trapped alone in a dark room with. However, from my interactions with him, he seemed rather mild-mannered and quiet, so I was not opposed to sharing a room alone with him. "Is this hotel haunted?" one of my friends half-jokingly asked the receptionist. They paused for a moment, looked at each other, and gave an ambiguous, polite smile to him, as if he had just told an inappropriate joke. The elevators were small and could only fit about 9 people crammed side by side. Me, my roommate, and this other guy took the second lift up. Strangely, the lift stopped at the 6th floor on the way up, and what we saw when the doors slowly parted spooked us. The entire floor was pitch dark. The walls were charred and everything was burnt black. It was clear that after the fire had devastated the level, no attempt to repair the damages had been put into place, and the entire affected floors were condemned altogether. We peeked outside the elevator, and there was not a soul in sight who had pressed the floor button, so we figured it must have been a glitch in the elevator system. It was a really old hotel after all. We talked about this with the other group of 9 who had just gone up. They mentioned that their lift, on the other hand, had mysteriously bypassed the 12th floor and stopped at an unnumbered floor just above, presumably what was once the 13th floor. Once the lift door opened, what they saw sent shivers down their spines. It seemed like that floor above held some kind of singular unit right at the end of the corridor, perhaps what might have been an old presidential suite. The door right in front of them was completely sealed up from top to bottom with thick metal chains, boarded with wooden planks and stuck with spirit-warding amulets and Chinese talismans. The entire floor was dark, with the only source of light being the creepy red candles lighted in the front of the door. Clearly, the management of the hotel was greatly disturbed by whatever was in there and had gone to great lengths to keep it from being unleashed onto the residents of the hotel. They said they had frantically mashed the buttons to close the doors and got down to the 12th floor. To be honest, contrary to all we had seen thus far, the 12th floor was not too shabby. The hallways were decently lit and cleaned, though there was a musty old carpet smell that filled the air. All in all, it seemed livable, unlike the nightmarish scene we had encountered on the 6th floor. Me and my roommate made our way to our unit, ironically numbered 1212 at the end of the hallway, next to the stairwell. Upon entering, a gust of unusually cold air engulfed us. The room was clearly worn out, with dark stains on the wall, heavy scratches on wooden furniture and creaky beds. The toilet, well, it was much worse. The mirror was slightly cracked at some areas. Faucet had heavy indented scratches, and we could have sworn we saw traces of long hair and what seemed to be residual dried bloodstains at the dry corners of the tub. There was a dreadful heavy feeling in the room, but neither of us knew why we felt like that. We had an early rest that night, and although the toilet lights switched off mysteriously and the toilet flushed on its own in the middle of the night, we chalked it up to a faulty switch and continued sleeping. Nothing much happened that night. On the second night, I had problems sleeping, having drunk too much energy drinks at the theme park that day, and stayed all the way up till 3 a.m. in the morning. Lying in my bed, playing with my handphone. If I recall correctly, it was at 3:16 a.m. that night things started to get weird. The TV suddenly switched on by itself with nothing but static on the screen, then turned itself off. The toilet door slammed incessantly and the faucet sounded like someone was repeatedly turning it on and off 3 times in a row, every few seconds. Somewhere from behind the walls beside my bed, you could hear the muffled whispers of a lady continuously uttering, "Where is it? Help me find it." But that could have been guests from the room beside. Despite all this, my roommate somehow managed to stay fast asleep, leaving me to face the horrors. Suddenly, everything stopped and the room was eerily silent again. I turned to look at my roommate, silently hoping for him to have been awoken by the ruckus, so I had some company. No reaction. He was facing the ceiling, blissfully unaware of what was happening. 10 seconds of foreboding silence passed. Suddenly he turned towards me, eyes still closed, and said in a deep, unnatural, raspy voice, "I'll kill you." I stared at him in shock, half expecting him to jolt up. Nothing. It seemed like he was still fast asleep. Was he sleep-talking? I did not sleep that night. The next day, I complained to the receptionists that the next-door female neighbor was causing quite a ruckus at night and disturbing our sleep. The receptionist shot me a puzzled look and told me the neighboring unit had been vacant for the past month. The last night was the worst. I did not have much problem sleeping that night as I was absolutely exhausted, and dozed off at about 10 p.m. At around 3 a.m. again, I suddenly woke up to the screech of furniture moving in the unit above and violent frantic footsteps. I rubbed my eyes sleepily and wondered what all the ruckus was about. It was then that I saw 7 black figures in the room. 6 of them were standing around my roommate's bed, staring at him, 2 on each side of the bed. One stood at the entrance of the toilet facing the bathtub. This figure seemed to have its neck craned downwards, looking for something on the ground. At that point of time, I thought that my roommate must have invited our other friends in or something while I slept. So in my groggy state, I did not pay much heed to the black figures. After all their attention seemed to be focused on my roommate. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Everything was eerily still. All of a sudden, he started moving strangely. The bed sheets rustled wildly, and I realized he was actually slithering off the bed upside down, arms pulling his sleeping body along, one at a time. Upon reaching the floor, he plopped down, motionless, facing the ceiling. Freaking out, I flinched. Immediately, all the black figures rapidly swiveled around in sync. The figures had their attention on me now. They knew I was awake. They knew I had seen them. In tandem with the figures, my roommate violently arched his back, head hanging upside down. With an erratic jerk, he contorted it to the left, where I lay. I was absolutely terrified. I knew I was cornered in this dark room. My only source of light was the tiny glow seeping through the gaps of the curtain. I could barely see where I was going. "I'll kill you." He chanted these lines fanatically on the floor, arms and legs twitching wildly. His eyes were still shut. At that moment, I turned my back, frantically searching for my handphone, hidden somewhere in between the pillows, for some light. "I'll kill you." A menacing whisper blew across my left ear, and I felt 2 cold hands brush my neck. I instantly jumped out of the bed in fear. There he was on the bed right behind me, head upside down, crawling up from the floor beside my bed. His hands were poised to strangle me, fingers outstretched and tensed in a peculiarly inhuman manner. Lips quivered into a creepy grin. I dashed towards the main room light switch and flipped it on. In an instant, the room was flooded with light. My eyelids slammed shut and I flinched for a second, adjusting to the sudden influx of brightness in what was a pitch-dark room just an instant ago. When I opened my eyes, the black figures were gone and my roommate was sprawled out on my bed, asleep, completely ignorant as to the terror he was just a minute ago. I noticed that the rosary he kept by his bedside had snapped into little beads as well. I took a chair, sat down and watched him the entire night with the lights on, fearing he would start attempting to strangle me again if I fell asleep. Trying hard to stay awake, I whipped out my phone and began looking up the history of the hotel. Woman found beheaded in gruesome hotel murder, August 16, 1998. 30-year-old lady violently beheaded by her husband, with a chopper found missing from the hotel kitchen. Her body was found floating in a pool of blood in the bathtub, with her head placed next to the faucet on top of the tub, eyes still wide open in terror, facing the door. I took a look at the pictures. One of them was a picture of the room taken from the outside. Never had seeing for numbers given me such a feeling of dread. Room 1212. It was our room. I glanced at the toilet door nervously, and instantly felt a cascade of goosebumps rush down my spine. It was as if her gaze never left the door. Apparently, the arrested husband swears he had been sleeping that night and woke up suddenly to find his wife murdered, with his hands covered in blood, holding the chopper. No one believed him. Police ruled it a homicide. Till this day, my roommate has no idea at all about what happened that night. I told him he was sleepwalking and that I was playing games on my phone the entire night after waking up and not being able to sleep. My friends all know what really happened, but we agreed that keeping it from him was the best thing to do. We found out from the janitor before leaving that the room at the unnamed floor was once the site of a traditional folk ritual that the hotel owners had organized in 1997 to ask for spirit help in boosting the ailing hotel business's occupancy. Apparently, the ritual went tremendously wrong, and all 6 of the mediums invited lost their minds and started decapitating each other with kitchen knives. smearing the entire room with blood. That year, a massive fire devastated most of the hotel as well. The unfortunate incidents finally stopped when they brought in a renowned temple priest to seal the room. Room 1212 was right underneath the sealed room. Subscribers of Nightmare Nuke, always check the history of the hotel you're staying in. If you don't, you might never get to leave.